long story short, I ended up becoming an FBI informant because I had a few tricks up my sleeve and I knew certain things about these guys, and they underestimated, like they knew I was 14 years old, and when it was working, they took my money. What's this kid gonna do? So I became, we called them up, we talked to them, and then they do a bit of an interview with me, and they're like, they were really worried because of my age, and they're like,
so it was at 14 you were
14.
an FBI informant.
Yeah, and I had to get my parents to sign off, which they wouldn't. My mom was really scared. She thought somebody was going to show up and kill us at home or something like that.
Guys, welcome to another episode. Now, they say, a wise man once told me that if you're the smartest person in the room, you should leave. In this case, I've locked the room and I've hidden the key with Benga, because this is the room that I should be staying in for as long as possible without leaving. Unfortunately for you, Nader, you should have left a long time ago.
No, the vibe in here is amazing, man. I love the energy, and the graphics in the back are just amazing. So this is an awesome place to be for a while.
Bro. I really appreciate you taking the time to come down. It's been a long time coming. Yeah. We almost didn't make it.
No, thank you for your patience.
Yeah, no.
Your patience has been amazing.
Dude, I've been excited to do this for a long time now, so it wasn't a case of patience. It was a case of just when you stopped being a patient.
Yeah.
You had to get it done.
One hell of an experience.
Nader Sabri, author, NASA Hall of Famer, which we'll get into later, growth hacker, all around. You could say you're our own version of Elon Musk. Elon, we have Nader, okay? We have our own version, and obviously he is better because he is Arabic, and that's the way forward. Tell me, how have you been? How's everything? I'm good.
Happy to be alive.
Yeah.
Happy to be kicking, seeing life through a different lens recently.
Yeah.
It's been, I'm always thankful for whatever God gives me, man. Everything happens for a reason. You connect with people at certain times for certain reasons. Certain things happen, and that's the beauty of life. Everything connects in a certain way, and you step back and you want to take a look and like, why did this connect? It's an amazing puzzle.
It is, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's with this whole situation as now, it's always a case of, no, it's not going to happen to me. It'll be all right.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
No.
It's not nice. It's a very weird situation that's going on.
Incredible.
So many people getting affected in very, very different ways.
Yep.
But nonetheless, I'm not going to give that lady, the Lady C, the power that she wants over us.
Yeah.
Okay, tell me a bit more about yourself. Tell me about where it all started, because I'm imagining you as quite this obviously started very young for you.
Yeah. I mean, probably my first true entrepreneurial experience. I was about, I was 14, 15 years old. And we had a show come in town. It was called the Franchise Show. And it was one of the very few venues that I would, at that time, understand to go to learn about business. So I went there and I met these guys that operate 900 numbers. So this is the 90s, right? So 900 numbers were like the internet of those days, information lines. I mean, when you say 900 number, obviously there's some quantitation that comes with that.
Yeah, exactly.
But that's not the only thing done with 900 numbers, right? So I met these guys. I mean, I was living in Canada at that time, and these guys were out of California, if I remember correctly. They were operating in California and Florida. And, they sell this opportunity. I think it was like $800 or $900. I don't know what it was. And they got like payment programs, and I was not even legal to buy one of these things, but I bought it. I set it up. I started to learn how they gave me this book called The 900 Words of Wisdom. I still remember this book. It was a really good book about how to build and sell information, because that's what a 900 number is. It's a information line. So I tried a whole bunch of stuff that didn't do as well as what the quantitation of that 900 number would come with. Yeah. So that's what I ended up doing, is I ended up at 14, 15 years old, without anybody knowing, setting up a 900 number that did that quantitation without us going into details. Yeah. So one of the ways that these things are set up, you set up a special code. That's how we kind of track campaigns, right? So you dial this number, you do extension this code, and you get access. You can even get special rates. So here I am, and can you imagine 14 years old, and as I tell these guys at school and guys you hang out with, and I was like, hey, I got a 900 number. Like, yeah, BS, you don't have that. And then I'd say, call in, I'll get you a special rate, use this code. So you can imagine how popular it became, and it started to make me a lot of money. So, and I did very well at it. So the guys at the bureau, the service bureau who were running this thing, approached me, and they're like, hey, you should put more money into advertising because you seem to be growing and you can kind of expand beyond what you're doing. So they got me into this, I think it was like a $20,000 program. And at that time, it was a bit of a stretch, but I was able to do it. And so I did. And then these guys just took my money. And then they didn't pay me my checks. And then it became basically they basically scammed me. So, I was being mentored by one of my father's friends, who was one of my first entrepreneurial kind of mentors. And he's like, well, we should raise a case against him. I was like, yeah, but am I ever going to really get my money? Long story short, I ended up becoming an FBI informant, because I had a few tricks up my sleeve and I knew certain things about these guys, and they underestimated, like they knew I was 14 years old, and when it was working, they took my money. What's this kid going to do? So I became, we called them up, we talked to them, and then they do a bit of an interview with me, and they're like, they were really worried because of my age, and they're like,
so was at 14 you were 14. An FBI informant?
Yeah. And I had to get my parents to sign off, which they wouldn't. My mom was really scared. She thought somebody was going to show up and kill us at home or something like that. And it was nothing like that, of course. At 14, I became an FBI informant on this criminal case. It wasn't the first time I became an informant on criminal cases, because I seemed to be very good at understanding how some of these financial crimes worked. And then I stopped at that. But anyways, that was probably one of my very first entrepreneurial experiences. When I started that and I lost all the money, I mean, my investor, or my VC at that time, was my father. I lost his money. And so I go to my dad to tell him the whole story and all that. And he's like, yeah, I want my money back.
Typical Egyptian.
Yeah, I want my money back. And then I was like, what? I was choked. But then, my mentor was like, listen, I mean, that's business, right? I mean, this is a business deal. So here I am. I was super depressed. I went to a cafe in my area. And in those days, they would use those, I don't know if you remember this, but they would have these kind of paper mats. Do you know what? When you go to a cafe and they just throw a paper mat.
On top of it,
yeah, and then when you're done, they kind of throw it out and crumple it. And then I'm sitting there, I'm looking at this mat, and it's in my hand. And then I start to realize, and I'm like, hey, this has got advertising value. And so I started niche community advertising. So I would go to restaurant owners, I'm like, hey, how many of these things do you buy? Oh, we go like, through $1,000 worth of things. And I said, what if I was to give it to you for free to save you $1,000, or some of these bigger other places was $2,000. And they're like, well, what's the catch? I was telling them, I'm just going to sell advertising for other community businesses like yours, and I'll give you a specific place in there at a much lower cost if you want, but there's no need. People are already in your restaurant. And so I started doing that, going from kind of restaurant to restaurant, had these things. And, you'd find like community shops, like flower shops and salons and video rental places that couldn't afford the big advertising in the newspaper, but wanted to catch people in the community, right? So it had a really cool kind of niche. So I did very well at it. I was going neighborhood to neighborhood, and I was making a killing at my age. I mean, I even bought my own car at that time. Wow. And then the big advertisers caught on to what I was doing, and like, how's this little piece of getting away with this? This is something we should own. And then I found myself competing with these guys, and they knocked me out. So, but I had made money, and so I paid my dad back. I went to pay him, and then he said, great. And then he just ripped the check up. And I was like, what the hell? And he says, no, that was just education I was paying for. Wow. He wanted to see if I would be able to find a way to get out of it and pay the money back. And that's where I started. Once I got the entrepreneurial bug, I didn't stop. I started learning a lot about how to structure a business, how to scale them up, how to innovate, how to develop from complete scratch. And then I started a web development business in 1994, believe it or not. I mean, this is my mentor was the one who guided me to this, because I had a background in advertising, getting those mats. I discovered another really cool niche and opportunity. And he said, you're wasting your time. Every time you're going to enter this thing, you're going to make money, and then the big guys are going to come back, and then you're going to just keep feeding them because you can't defend yourself. You need to get into something a bit more sophisticated, something that kind of blends with the way that you think and work. And there's this thing called the internet. And it was in 1994, as you can imagine. Nobody knew what it was. Nobody knew what web development was. But I went to the bookstore. I started learning everything possible. I learned HTML, learned how to code, how to develop graphics, and then I started my own little web house. And it was cool because I would get a few people at $1,000 to $3,000, and it was like the latest thing. Yeah. And then
3,000 was a lot then as well.
Yeah. And then it was just like they were. I don't know if you remember those days, but they were like the gray background and like with a few images because it would take a long time and then a whole bunch of information. But when explained properly in those days, I mean, people would get it. But there was this one stat that blew me away, and that was the anchor. There was a stat in 1994 or 5 said, by the year 2000, which is 5 years away, 6 years away, there'll be more people on the internet than the most populated country on the planet. So today you're like, duh. But you're standing in 1994 where we're still using BBS. We're using modems, like dial-up modems, and nobody knows what the internet is. It takes forever to load up an image, and you're like, how the hell is this going
turn
to
into that.
exactly more people using it than the most populated country in the world. And that became my inspiration. I printed it out, I put it on my wall, and I knew that that was the future, and everything that I was going to do was going to be about tech and innovation, and that was the beginning of it. And then a few months later, I ended up finding my two other co-founders, and then we started one of the world's first internet service providers.
Wow.
Yeah, ended 1994, early 1995, as you can imagine. I think there was something like maybe 200 domain names registered at that time, which we took big advantage of. We registered all major universities
Wow.
domains,
and then you sold them back to
yeah, some of us took us to court, but we had a good legal team at that time as we grew. And sometimes we'd have to give up some of them, and some of them we would be able to sell. We knew we couldn't always sell them for a lot because they were universities. There was so many domains I wish we had bought at that time, but
MichaelJackson.com.
yeah, exactly. Or Hotmail. If you knew something like Hotmail was going to exist like a year or two later, that would have been a smart move. So we set up the internet service provider. We exited in 1999. So we spent like those 5 years developing significant infrastructure. So we started just in our own city, and then we expanded to our province, and then as we went public, the reason we were going public is to go national. So we had one trick up our sleeve. It was just by luck. I mean, we were called Calgary Online, and it was like col.ca, and so we switched it to Canada Online, ended up competing with America Online, which is the 800-pound gorilla. And so and then we sold it, we made some good money, and then I started building a whole bunch of tech companies that didn't work.
Wow.
For good reason. Hindsight, it was awesome. I built a first generation AI company in 2001. Cost us about $8 million to build as a company. So that's the money we'd raised. When I give talks today, if I was to build the exact same company to do something very similar, would be for $8,000. I can probably build almost the same thing, because we were building the groundwork when so much stuff didn't exist. And we would have to predict what the future would look like and then build it. And you wouldn't know at the end by building it what would happen. You just wouldn't.
See, bro, and we were just dancing. We were just dancing with our friends while he was creating the world of the internet, bro. We were just sitting there going, no, you can't do this one. You can't do this one. That's amazing. So how old were you at that time?
When I went public, I was, I think, about 19, 20, I was maybe, 19, 20.
I just shrank a little bit more there.
Yeah. I mean, at that stage, I was like, this is, I mean, from the learning we had in those 5 years, everything I saw, I mean, we started experimenting with voice over IP with a team actually out of Amsterdam who saw the same future that we saw, that the internet was going to move voice around just as a form of data. It was just going to move everything around. So we saw, any opportunity with images, any opportunity with video, any opportunity with voice, any opportunity, that combines them. We knew that there was an opportunity for the creation of a technology that would enhance that. And so we built these orange, what do you call it? Phone booth. If you remember the public phone booth. So we built these orange ones in Amsterdam because they love orange. So they built it, and they became kind of like a point-to-point voice over IP, and then point to multi-point. And we were testing it. It didn't go very far. I mean, we weren't able to kind of raise money. Nobody understood like free phone calls. I mean, placing a long distance call was anywhere between $1 to $2 a minute. Too lucrative for the telecom companies to let go of. As you can probably predict why some of them block it. But so
crazy.
it was pretty amazing, man. Pretty amazing.
I mean, there's going to be a lot in this show where I'm just listening and not answering back. So feel free to keep going, because like the story is so interesting. And then where did you go from there?
Well, after that, as I was, so Canada, I don't know if you're familiar with it, but Canada's kind of like the back end of Silicon Valley. So a lot of today you're starting to see some of it rise, but it's been 40 years in the making, and it was amazing being part of that engine. So, for example, Uber, one of the founders is from Canada, so it was a Canadian-built company, and then they couldn't raise the money. Usual story in Canada, because you need big money to scale. Canada is roughly a 32 to 35 million population, and the US is 10 times that amount. So the scale in a place that's kind of homogenous to that of Canada, but 10 times the population is the big kind of opportunity, but you got to go south. So a lot of these very well-trained tech entrepreneurs and engineers in Canada would find the greener side across the border. And so Silicon Valley didn't believe in it in the beginning, like everything had to be kind of valley built, and then they started to recognize this flow of talent that would just come over the border. They speak the language the same way. They have the same or even better standards when it came to development and many other things they were doing. So they started to heavily tap into the Canadian market, and so Canada became kind of the back end to a lot of these things. So Silicon Valley was about a 2.5 hour flight from where I live in Canada, so it wasn't like a big deal to get to. So I spent some time there, and I was trying to build kind of more companies. I figured, let me, like other Canadian entrepreneurs, let me shift down to south and see what can happen. But I had a very unusual change in route.
Yeah.
Very unusual change in route. So there was a gentleman I'd met who lobbies on behalf of the tech industry, and he started to see how I was like building all these companies, and the strategies were extremely sophisticated, how it brought tech and the business world together. He's like, hey, we kind of need a guy like you.
He's like, I need a maniac like you.
We need you to come over to Washington and work with us, help us out to represent the tech industry. I was like, dude, I'm not interested in government. And he's like, that's because you haven't seen it all yet. And so he was an extremely persuasive guy, and it paid very well. I gotta admit, it paid very well. And I took the plunge. I said, let me give this a try, because some of the tech companies I was building at that time weren't working. Let me try representing this industry. And there's always a thing I tell people about when it comes to tech and innovation. Knowing tech and knowing the tech business are two different things. So a lot of people, they build tech, understand, they get excited about tech, but they don't understand the tech business, right? Tech business is very different to understanding what the tech is.
What is the difference? Because I am one of these people that doesn't understand the
difference.
difference.
See the tech. Okay, so the difference is understanding things like adoption. So that's that. If I understand the tech business, I'll understand that adoption is a core thing, and the number is about 50 million. So there's a kind of a chart that's used. It's a very famous chart, and they look at all the major industries, and the mass adoption is about 50 million people, and they take a look at how long certain industries, so like airlines and credit cards, and it took them generations, right? 1 to 2 generations, some of these things. And some of the fastest things to adapt, I think, was what's that Nintendo game?
Mario?
No, the more recent one, something Go. Can't even remember.
Something Go. Pokemon
Go. Yeah, 19 days, man. They hit 50 million people, right? And
that's when everyone was in the streets trying to find their Pokemons and all that stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So 19 days to hit 50 million people, and so understanding how to get to scale and how to adapt to scale, automating scale. So one of the big problems in automating scale, understanding again the tech business side, is if I was to build something for you that can automate something, and then your first temptation is turn it up all the way, right? Why not? It's still costing me the same thing, but you can't, because you cannot handle it. And that's probably the number one problem I have with a lot of my clients. Is like, let's just pump this thing up all the way. I was like, you can't, because you will not be able to handle it. So you got to kind of pump it up with time, and then upgrade and move along, because your barrier is not the tech, it's the human adoption, right? Change of behavior. I mean, you've seen what happened with the pandemic, right? How, I can imagine this, like e-learning, it started like in 2000, literally. In year 2000, e-learning started. I know it was very basic at the time, but its roots started in the year 2000, which is 20 years ago, 21 years ago from where we stand. Only in 2020 did it hit, it go to this like mass adoption, and all of it was already there. It was just more and more people using it, and because many people had to. Necessity. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Incredible, isn't it?
So do you find that the tech industry has thrived during
the
pandemic?
Yeah. I mean, they're flexing their muscles, as you can see with the U.S. elections. I mean, big tech, I think, I don't know if it surprised many people, but they were able to show people how powerful they are still till today. And in the last few weeks, being in the growth hacking space, and we can talk about that a little bit more, but we know that in the last month or so, there's been significant breaches globally, and you're going to see some of it popping up in the media. Usually these companies try to keep these breaches out of media because of the significant liabilities, but there's been an incredible, it's called like a cyber attacks. I mean, I don't know how else we'll put it, but there's been a lot of activity in the cyber world, and big tech and big companies have been under massive attack, and your information is not safe. It's out there. These guys have put it into the dark web, and we see all kinds of things happening, and you'll be seeing more of it in the news. That I made you aware of it.
Do you think that's the biggest danger in tech? Because also there's a dark side of tech, isn't there?
There's an extremely dark side to tech.
Does it worry you? Is it something you think about? Is it something that did you ever have a come to the dark side moment where they were
I mean, if you're deep in tech, there's always going to be a dark side. I got to just tell you that. I mean, in the growth hacking world, a lot of the guys I train and bring in, there are a lot of them start in the dark side. So we run a program I call it grayscale, right? So it's not shifting to white hat tricks, because white hat tricks everybody can learn. You can Google it and figure it out. There's no value in that. And then going obviously to the black side or dark side is illegal, dangerous. So we work on the grayscale, and usually on the darker side of the grayscale. So where we don't break laws, but we're able to maximize the capabilities of what we actually know. But going deeper into the dark side, there's a lot going on. There's a lot of angry people out there.
Because I was fascinated when I heard about the dark web.
Yeah.
When I first kind of stumbled on it years and years ago, I was fascinated by it.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't have the balls to find my way there.
Probably a good idea.
But I heard that it's not a joke. It's like, it sounds like let's go on the dark web and see what we can find. But it's like, there are people that, I don't know if you've seen it, but there's these YouTubers that they order mystery boxes.
Okay.
So you'll pay a bit of money. I mean, it happens in normal YouTube and normal things where you mystery box, there might be some trainers in there. You might get some Louis Vuitton shoes.
Oh, yeah.
But there's like a dark web version.
Okay.
Where you might get a severed hand in it. You might get a used gun. You might get, you don't know what's in it.
Wow.
And there's these YouTubers that they kind of open them up and see but it's all, dark web orders and stuff like that. It's insane.
It's insane.
Like
wow.
How completely unparalleled those two worlds are all, running simultaneously at the same time.
Yeah.
Without anyone really knowing about it. I mean, you can go your whole life without knowing about the dark side of the web.
Oh, 100%. I mean, the other crazy thing is like a lot of the really big things that happen in the sense of the disruptions and innovations start in the dark web. Like growth hacking started in the dark web and it's come to the open. But the thing is, I mean, it's almost like when you look at like just regular traditional crime. So these criminals, they're geniuses. I mean, they're smart. And you step back and you're like, dude, I mean, if you were using that kind of intelligence and that kind of energy for something on the other side of the equation.
If you had my book, you would have been Escobar.
Yeah. But they don't. I mean, the thing is, like, there was once a guy, he's a criminologist. So he once told me, he's like, the equation is like this. It's like what pays more, right? He's like, if crime pays more, you get more criminals. If the other side pays more, you get less criminals, right? And this happens. I mean, we see people from the dark web, growth hackers all the time who are on the edge, let's say, they get hired all the time. This is how Facebook and Google and all these big guys go out and hire people. They just don't put an ad out there because they just can't get the right guys. They find the guys who break the system and just pay them a lot of money. But the trick to it is like with all that money, is that more than they can make? And that's where the problem is. They can make so much more not taking those high-priced jobs.
Yeah, it's true, because if they already know where to go or where to be, then they don't really need you, do they?
No, they don't. And they don't need to show up to a 9 to 5, even if you made it remote.
And it's mostly young kids that are doing this, right? The whole dark side of the of the data.
Well, they're the most attracted to it because you know what it is, the psychology. So let's go into the psyche of this thing, right? So imagine like you live in a world where you don't have any power. You've got all these rules and you feel contained, right? And many of them are social degenerates in their own way. I mean that in a nice way, by the way. So this is not to be insulting. And so tech gives them this inherent superpower where like I can do whatever I want to anybody, or I can plug into this, I can push that away, I can bring this over to the left.
I can do it in front of your face and you wouldn't even know. And still watch you call me a nerd and be like, okay.
Yeah, that's intoxicating.
Well, let's see tomorrow when your accounts are all emptied and
exactly.
you've ordered 4 Teslas that you can't afford.
Yeah, exactly.
Get delivered to your house.
Yeah.
Wow, that's insane. So where did NASA come into play?
Well, in rough end of 2008-9, like this, I started well, the inspiration actually started before that. So I went for a pilgrimage in Mecca with my wife. It was the first time ever for me to go there, completely like overwhelmed with like amazing positive energy. And here I am at this time of day. It was just like one of these more empty times of day, and I'm on the white marble and I'm just loving it, man. And from a distance, this guy catches my eye. And he's an old guy. I mean, he's about 80, 90 years old. I mean, he looked that much. And he had this beautiful face because it was like, these old kind of Bedouin faces where you can see his history in his face, right? And so he just mesmerized me. I don't know why. It was something about his energy. But he tried to pray and he couldn't. Like, he was just physically unable to. But he didn't care, man. Yeah. He just kept going. Like, he was so devoted. And I just kept sitting watching this guy. And I was like... And then the flash of genius came. I said, how is it like this guy's probably started praying from when he's 7 or 8 years old or whatever it is, and how is it for the last 70 plus years or 1400 years? I started thinking a lot bigger. I was saying for 1400 years, why is it with today's technology and tools that someone like him must suffer like this. I said, this is an impossibility. It must be solved. And so I told my wife about it. I went home and I started, working with high performance materials that all failed. I mean, I went through tons of like failure experiments and stuff like that. And then I said, time to do what I usually do. Let me get the best people I know. So one of the guys I started, I don't even know why I called him. He came on my mind at that time. It was just a pure idea, nothing to do with space technology. He's a NASA scientist, friend of mine from Canada. And so we started talking.
As you do in your field.
Yeah.
You have a friend who's in NASA. That's totally normal.
So he's like, he became fascinated by the inspiration. And he's like, dude, there's a way to do this. And let's just like ramp up R&D. And so we started doing, a year of R&D, me and him, about, high performance materials, how they work, where to find them. And here we are going into the second year of just developing this thing. And all of a sudden, like, he says, you need to continue on your own. Now, he wasn't part of the project to begin with. He was kind of like someone who's just so passionate about the problem. And he figured that there must be a way to solve this, right? And ultimately, what we were, as I go through the story, I'll explain to you what we were trying to solve. I'll kind of keep you hanging.
Yeah, because I was thinking.
Yeah. So what happened is we started exploring space materials that can solve the problem. And so he started opening up different resources for me, and I would do the R&D, and I'd get the right people in place. And then all of a sudden, he gets a call from the guys at headquarters. Hey, what are you working on? And so he's like,
why you keep borrowing all this cloth?
Yeah, like what are you doing? Like we didn't take anything. I mean, it was just an exchange of resources and knowledge and all that. And he said, I'm working on this project with this entrepreneur friend of mine, and he's trying to solve the following problem. And he explained the whole thing to them. They said, that's fascinating, but it's kind of breach of contract. Do you mind if you just step away? They were really polite.
Yeah.
So he's like, dude, I can't help you anymore, but I think you're on your way. You got enough of what you do. I said, yeah, I had a grip at that time. So I continued the R&D, and then I would get like a call from him saying, hey, these guys wanted to actually have a word with you. Do you mind? And they were just scientifically fascinated by what I was working on. And so, we'd have these weird sort of nerdy technical conversations about, what I discovered. And I would kind of pick their brains about, hey, like, what else do you think that I would be missing, or where else can I go next to figure out some of these things? And then the conversation, the narrative started to change a bit. I'd still kind of get these calls, and they were kind of like, so with scientists, sometimes they're a bit abrupt by nature, right? That's their kind of personality. And like, you feel the question is kind of suspicious. I'm like, why do these guys keep calling me, man? What do they want? I need to build a business here, right? That's I'm just using the science and the innovation to get to a goal here, right?
Yeah, means to an end.
Means to an end. Yeah. And here we go. Like I'm starting to get the solutions in place. We're starting to see how things work. And I received at least 4 or 5 of these type of calls. By the time and then I got a call from my friend, and he's like, hey, so did they speak to you? And I was like, speak to me about what, man? These guys keep asking me questions, man. Right? No, he's like, no, but they didn't like speak to you, because as I told you, sometimes communications with certain people is a little bit different. And so he said, okay, I have to make a call, and then I'll have someone give you a call. I was like, what's going on here, right? So this guy from HQ called me up, and he started talking to us. He says, hey, man, with what you're doing, is first off super fascinating how you're bringing spirituality and space tech together. Never happened. Like, this is just amazing, and what's being done is of great interest to us. And so he said, do you know that you qualify to become a space certified technology company? I was like, I have no idea what that is. I have no idea what you've just told me. I don't know what that means. I'm just focused on getting this thing done and out to build a business around it. And that's what happened. I mean, I built it and started moving along, and then this conversation continued and said, hey, you know what? We want to certify you. We'd like you to become part of our technology transfer program, and we see some potential, which is called spin in and spin off. So spin off is usually I take from them some materials or technology that they support me with, and spin in is when I provide back, which adds to their body of knowledge as an entity and how they decide to use it. And that's what happened. I became the 43rd person in history to ever be certified. I went to the U.S. To Kennedy Space Center, and the inauguration was like pretty cool experience. Like 800 scientists who came, and I had the opportunity to deliver a keynote speech. And I made a nonprofit initiative that time called Get to Space, to get 2 billion people to space, in partnership with them. And the whole objective was to get people from our part of the world and the other part of the world is also like just U.S. out, basically,
exactly.
to get to space. But but the process was what we were interested in, is how people can use science and technology to create more peace on earth, really. And how young people can get into the development process and realize that you just don't have to be a scientist to be part of space. You can be as simple as even as a designer to design, a future astronaut suit. So people were kind of surprised. So part of my program, I actually had a talk in Cairo, Egypt at the Rise Up Summit in 2014, I think it was. Yeah. And so I ran a program with them called Become an Astronaut. I had 1,400 signups in an hour, man.
Wow.
Yeah. We brought in like an astronaut from an Egyptian astronaut. He was living in Germany. So I brought him in. I was like, here's a live astronaut. And we had another astronaut come. People were like, wow, this is amazing. I was like, hey, would you like to be like this? And we start talking about it. So that was like just a private initiative that I did to get people inspired. But then I got inaugurated. And before I got inaugurated, I was inaugurated by Jim Kennedy. So Jim Kennedy is the former director of the Kennedy Space Center. And what I didn't know, and I found this out after I met him, he's actually the nephew of JFK.
No way.
Yeah, man. Yeah. So interesting. But he approached me. He's very eloquent. Approached me and said, when I read about your profile, you scared the out of me. And I was like, I'm about to get on stage to talk to these guys, which is very intimidating. And that was like the last thing you want to hear.
Yeah.
And he turns around and he says, in 56, when we built the Space Act, right? When the Congress passed the Space Act, the first goal of that Space Act is to embetter mankind. And you meet that goal in an extremely unique way. He's like, I've worked on 500,000 spin-off and spin-in technology transfers. This is the most inspiring of them all. And that just gave me the boost to get on stage because that had scared me. And then, the rest is history, man. So when I sold my company, we got bought out in end of 2017, early 2018. I called them up and said, hey guys, this has been an awesome ride, but I've sold my company, and obviously doesn't transfer over and all that.
To NASA or?
No, it was a private investment firm in Canada that bought us out. They bought the intellectual property, and they said, well, we don't want to see you go. And then that was kind of the end of the call. And then they called me later on and said, hey, we have a way that we just want to keep you as part of our organization somehow. So they appointed me to the Space Technology Hall of Fame as a judge for 3 years, and where I got access to, I basically adapt like 7 companies every year with 7 other judges, and we would work with these technology transfer companies on how to commercialize and develop their company. So they would call me in for these talks, and to some of them in the Valley and across other parts of the U.S., where they would say, like, we really want you to talk about the technology transfer process that you used that was very successful to help other companies in the space tech space. And so I became this guy who was talking about this all the time and helping some of these companies, and some of them greatly benefited. So to put it in perspective, I mean, we became profitable in 17, 18 months. Your average space company can take several years.
Wow.
Yeah, because it can get out of control a bit. So it was a fun ride, man.
And what is it that you created?
I created the world's first physiological prayer and meditation mat. So it helps alleviate pain and posture problems and increase your blood circulation. That's the first innovation. The second innovation, which they took to the International Space Station, that's why it was a spin and spin-off, is we had an antimicrobial with the nanotechnology integrated into the fabric that removes microbials. So things like dust, because we knew when we did our research, people had problems with dust, people had problems with fungus, other things that were actually growing on just your typical mat.
Yeah.
And our mat became hygienic because of this technology we're using. So they became so interested in that development that they took it on as well. Yeah.
So guys, I'm going to try and refabric these chairs by the next episode with some antimicrobial stuff. So hopefully it's not going to be as dirty as it is now. So do you still, obviously you still have your own mat and stuff, right?
Well, my own product, you mean? Yeah, I mean, I have one left at home.
Surely you kept one there.
Yeah, I mean, it's weird because you see there's something weird about innovation guys or inventors, and I thought it was weird for me, but I found it happens to almost all of us, where you just never want your product. Like you do it, but like you don't really use it because it's like the energy is for everybody else. So you feel weird using your own product. It's really strange.
It's like that in a lot of things. It's even like when I was growing up, when my mother used to cook, and then she'd finish, and we'd be like, "Mama, come on, eat." She'd be like,
exactly.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
She'd be like, I cooked for you guys. And I'd be like, but you spend 3 hours in the kitchen, like you're not gonna eat.
Exactly. She put the energy in for you. That's exactly it. And put the energy in for someone else to use it. And we changed so many people's lives. It was inspiring, man. I mean, at some stage we set up a retail space, which we didn't keep open very long because it didn't make sense. But we had a medical team that we'd bring, and they would physiologists and physiotherapists, and so we would run free sessions for our clients. They'd come on in, and so we ran one. So our resident physiotherapist was a female. And so the ladies would obviously like to go to her. So here I'm at my retail shop, we're standing outside, and she'd go run in the back these sessions with the ladies. And she said, one old lady said, who's this guy? He's standing outside, always watching. It's like, no, he's the founder, the inventor, because I don't like being in the front. And then she's like, I want to meet him. So this old short lady, so cute actually, and all covered up and everything. And she's like, do you mind if I shake your hand? And so we shake hands, and she's like, I've been praying that someone would invent someone like this for me.
Wow.
Because this is, you wouldn't believe what it's done for me. I couldn't do this and that. And now you've given me this mobility. And I said, awesome. That's why we exist.
That's it's truly inspirational, dude.
Yeah.
Did you used to get a lot of speeding tickets when you were younger?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I actually invented something to come over.
That's what I'm going on.
No, literally. And it was outlawed.
Yeah.
It was
so
outlawed.
let's talk about the speed demon.
So the speed demon. So I invented, so it was the speed devil is what it was
speed
called.
Devil, that's it, yeah.
And so what happened was, so I had one of my father's friends. He was he runs a Photoshop. I don't mean Photoshop the graphic program. I mean like an actual old Photoshop with chemicals. And so I was like telling me, I'm sick of these speeding tickets and shit. And I said, I think I have a solution. So I started working with
Of course you did.
Yeah.
It's you.
So there's this company called Top-Made Plastic. So they make the Rubbermaid, the same company, but they specialize in the what do we call it? The polyurethane tech, right? Yeah. So I went to these guys and I was like, the law states that the thing has to be visible. How do I make it invisible? And I have a way to potentially do it, but I'm going to be doing many prototypes. So I'm going to be kind of outsourcing these designs to you, but in incremental ways. And the guy there was like, they were so fascinated. They're like, okay, and obviously there's a cost to it, but I was like, can you make it like really low until I can figure it out so I can get production? And so they partnered with me. So here we are, me and my father's friend, we would go into the alleyway. He gets so by the way, we studied photo radar. Like we called the manufacturers, we got the specifications, we figured the whole thing out. So we built our own equivalent of a photo radar. Wow. And we would put this thing in front of an old license plate and we just take the pictures and people would be looking out. So what the hell are these guys doing? Until we kept testing and testing until eventually we got the right angle. So the way it works is like the naked eye can see through it, but the camera can't. And the way it works is we'd have like this angle where the light would shoot in and it would bounce here and it would block out the information. And so we'd have all these edges and it would be legal. You would just put it in. And then, so I had a provisional patent. That provisional patent was issued a few years prior to when I actually took it. Provisional patent means that I can, before going and spending all the money to get a full patent, I can design it in advance for, at that time, it was like $75, which is like a big difference in the cost, right? So $75, I think I get, was it a year or two until I have to file to get a full patent, but they give me the date of filing of my initial provisional patent. So I'd done that, but one of the rules is that there must be no law. You must not be breaking an existing law. At the time I started, there was no breaking the law. By the time I came in, they said that there can't be anything on the license plate because they knew that something was going to come out to do it. So here I am. I've got all these prototypes. I was pretty depressed. I was going to sell them for $49.99. So I passed them out to all my buddies. And like, at least we won't get tickets. And all these guys are like speeding around town. I was like, dude, I'd pay $149 for this. Like just one ticket is ROI on this thing, avoiding it. And I was like, damn, man, I missed the price by 3 times what people would actually pay, but it was too late. One of the failures, man.
That's crazy, dude. It's like your mind never stops working, right?
Yeah, well, I'm getting older, man.
Here's a question. When you were dealing with NASA, did you ever happen to come across any documents about any flying things in the sky?
I mean, I would ask some of the guys that work there. Like, I mean, none of them would ever deny that something exists and something's out there.
Confirm or deny your question.
Yeah, I mean, no one would confirm it, but no one would deny it. And from the way they would speak, like there is something there. I mean, there is, and I believe it as well. That there is another energy out there, and we are connected to it. We just don't understand it, and it's one of these big discoveries that will come with time.
Did you hear about Bob Lazar?
No.
The guy who apparently was working what's it called? Re-engineering? No, not de-engineering. When you deconstruct something from reverse engineering. Apparently he said that he was reverse engineering UFOs and he was. It's actually quite interesting. Like when you
Oh, yeah.
first hear it, you're like,
Yeah,
all
yeah,
right."
exactly.
But
Yeah,
he's talking about stuff that, didn't come out for years, like element 151, and all these things that
Okay.
that is only just now they've got it in the Hadron Collider and all that stuff. But he was like,
Yeah.
we had that, and he was saying that, 20 years ago.
Yeah, yeah.
It's fascinating because there's so many people that would 100% say to you, yeah, well, they 100% exist. I've seen them.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
you know
yeah,
what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, I know people who claim that they've seen it
Yeah.
and they'll swear by it. I mean, these guys are not hallucinating. For some reason, they usually end up in the U.S. and Canada.
Right? Yeah, exactly.
So maybe Australia.
Yeah.
Sometimes I don't know.
Yeah.
But in this part of the world, I mean, there are some videos and people claim they've seen it, but the incident rate is not that high.
Yeah.
Which is a bit weird.
I mean,
Yeah, I don't know.
it's really weird. I
Yeah,
mean, that's
yeah.
the kind of fantastical thing about life and life on Earth,
Yeah.
that we have all these things going on at once that could be true and couldn't be true.
Yep.
But you just kind of, let's see what happens.
You see what happens. Yeah,
Yeah.
you do discover with time. I mean, the funny thing is, like, never doubt a hunch, right? Like, I've always, it's one of the difficulties I've had with time in life, and I had a life coach who's been working with me on this, and it's about trusting your intuition. Like, your intuition can tell you so much more. You've been put into this kind of world where it's like you have to have evidence for everything, or nobody will ever believe you. And if you brought all the evidence, no one would still believe you. So you get what I mean?
Yeah.
So sometimes you'll have this hunch, and I always tell people, like, an innovation or creativity starts with a hunch, right? You can't prove it, but you know that there's something there, and there's some energy that's connecting you to something. It's up to you to explore it and experiment and discover it. And then when you do, bam.
I totally agree. I mean, ever since I've been young, I've always associated the hunch, that gut feeling, the hunch and the conscience with God.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like
yeah.
if there's any proof of another power, your conscience and that feeling inside you, it's too correct, it's too guiding, it's too
weird. It's
too
weird.
specific,
It's weird. Yeah,
you know?
it feels strange, man. Like, when there's a thing like you just know something is gonna happen. You have no way to explain it. It happens, and you're like, how did I know that?
It's even that, when someone's looking at you and then you turn around and they're just like,
yeah,
and you're like,
yeah. I went to a leadership course in 2017 where they talked about this specific phenomenon. So there's a guy in Germany who studied these things called they call it leader from the field. That's the technical name for it. And they talk about these energy levels. So I've been studying energy and wanting to get more of it. I don't know enough of it, and I couldn't speak as an expert on it. But he was talking about these 42 phenomena, and one of them you just spoke about is like eyes behind the head is one of them, or knowing someone is gonna come and show up, and they would show up.
Yeah.
And so he's gone back to study how this happens, and he has these energy tests. So there's this energy test he trained me on. He said, go sit somewhere that's busy, and then guess the color of the t-shirt of the person coming in. And then every time you get it right, detect what happens on your body that's differently. Was your pulse a bit higher? Were you completely dazed? I mean, whatever it is, and start to discover what elements of your body that are connecting with what energy form, that every time someone's talking, you're getting it right.
it's just awareness, being aware of yourself, right?
Yeah.
It's too specific. It's there's too much mathematical perfection in the world for it not to be. It doesn't make sense.
Agreed.
It can't be an accident.
No, it's not by mistake. No, like there is
by
a reason.
design, even down to the Fibonacci spiral and everything. It's too specific.
Yep.
So, where do we get into growth hacking now?
So, as I was building my last company, the NASA company, I kept hiring some very technically competent people, let's put it like that, and I would get kind of deeper and closer to, let's call it, to the darker side of the gray scale. And so, this started in 2009 when growth hacking was just becoming coined. So everyone was like, "Oh, you're such a growth hacker," and I was like, "What the hell is that, man? What does that mean?" And then I would always get people like, "Man, you should start a growth agency with the kind of stuff that you guys are doing to scale up. I mean, it's just very unique." And then so when I sold my company, I kind of went through this period. I was like, what am I going to do next? And then one of the things I wanted to do next was start training and teaching other people how to do this. Take my 25 years of building things and teaching other people to do it. So I said, well, let me focus on growth hacking. So I wrote a book. It was called Ready, Set, Growth Hack. Yeah. And it became a bestseller. It's a blueprint. And I'm going to explain why a blueprint, because most people are like, a blueprint, oh, you're going to tell me exactly how to do it. I said, no, all that stuff that people tell you, turnkey, and there's only one way to do it, or there's a formula, is all bullshit. That's not true. Everybody... Yeah, exactly. Everyone has his own formula. Your formula will never be the same as somebody else, right? So even if you try to repeat, it won't be the same. But what a blueprint does, it creates a process for you to reach your formula. And my objective is to figure out what that is for you. So that's what the first book did. It would teach you things in the beginning, like foundation things like warfare mechanics, underdog tactics, asymmetrical warfare, which is like the going like really deep into growth hacking, which is essentially how the small guy wins, right? Yeah. And it happens all the time in history. People don't believe it. Like we go back to the same point we had earlier, where like you put the evidence in front of it, they don't believe it. Yeah. So when I tell like small startups, you could be the next Google, or you could be Google, and they're like, how is that? They're too big. I'm like, well, you know that Google was in the same position as you. And if you take a look at like Barnes and Noble versus Amazon, right? Same kind of switch. You take a look at Netflix versus Blockbuster. Like there's this giant that falls, right? It always happens, and then this bigger one pops up. And it builds another ecosystem around them. So it's a cycle. It keeps going around and around. Yeah.
Just repeating itself.
Yeah.
Okay, and so let's get deeper into growth hacking.
Let's do it.
I'm going to get an image up of the growth thinking.
Yeah.
How would you, if you had to? Okay, you can't summarize a book like this because I went through it.
Yeah.
And the one thing that really caught me was the amount of work I had to do.
Yeah.
Myself.
Yep.
It wasn't read this great book with advice.
Yep.
It was nah, mate.
Yeah.
Do this,
you're
and I want
work.
to see your I want to see your working out. I want to see your numbers. I want to see how you got to that sum. I want to. Do you know what I mean? We're not cheating this.
Yeah.
We're doing this together. I'm happy to help you, but I'm not doing it for you.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's what really fascinated me about it. When I was looking through it, I was like, and it's quite funny because it gave me a sense of accountability that I didn't want to start it yet.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Okay.
But in a positive way.
Yeah.
Because what it did, it was like, okay, this is not something I can do for a week.
Yep.
This is not something I can just piss about with.
Yep.
I'm either going to do this or I'm not going to do this.
Yep.
So it made me feel very responsible and very accountable, and it showed me that, okay, so this is now what you're going to be doing.
Yep.
And it's going to take, just like you're watching TV, just like you're having your pre-workout, just like you're going to have to factor in this into your life.
Yep.
And if you don't, what are we doing here?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Why are we doing this? Because and it's very interesting because so many authors will be like, I'll tell you how to do it.
Yeah.
Read this.
Yep.
Well, first of all, we all know that you learn, I think it's 8 times as much when you write something down.
Yep. Yeah, you have to manifest it.
Yeah.
If it doesn't manifest, you're not learning. Yeah. You're just listening.
Even by writing, by seeing the words and writing, I think there was a scientific thing that they did about that you're even down to your neurons when you're writing something down, that your body remembers it and recalls it a lot more than if you're just looking at something. That's
one of the first ways we were trained to memorize. If you remember, you're a kid, like say, write it down and repeat it.
Exactly.
Right? And then keep repeat, and then they're like,
exactly. And so this for me, I instantly thought of the word mantra when I first kind of started skimming through the things, and I was like, yeah, this is something that it becomes a part of you. It's like an extension of your dream or your manifestation or whatever. It's not read this and if you understand it, you know, great. If you don't, I got my $13.95 anyway, so wait for my next book kind of thing. And that's what really fascinated me. And I'm not just saying that just because we're friends or whatever.
Of course. Yeah.
It was really interesting to me.
Yeah. Well, the objective behind it is to activate you. So what happened is with the last book, it was a really good foundation for people to learn what's what, right? And I gave I think it was 88 tools in there and 50 proven strategies just to get you started. My whole objective was like, get started. Don't read, just get started. Use this book. In fact, I have some workbook style things inside the original book where I tell people, pick up the pen and mark up this book. That's what it's meant for. But what I learned in the next year after that, when I wrote this book, was that there was, so first off, in the growth hacking space, there's no equivalent to the design thinking methodology or the business canvas model, which people are familiar with. None of that existed in the growth hacking space. That's the first problem. The second problem is taking an idea to action in a snap, which is the objective of the book, doesn't exist. So what happens, you get, and by the way, 99% of growth hacks fail. So we call them, the half-baked world, right? They come up with these half-baked ideas and then they try to implement them as a growth hack and it doesn't work, and then they just go to the next thing and they work for a short period of time, and there's a reason behind that. So there's a science behind all that, and I train people behind it. But the reason behind the book where it works like that, and I'm glad to hear that it activates you like that, is it's designed to get you started to start growth hacking whatever it is that you want to start growth hacking. It allows you to be extremely creative. So all the space in there is designed for creativity, but there's a system to that creativity, which is light structure. Then on the sides of it, if you notice in the front, there's a structure, and the end there's a structure, and there's a learning system. So the structure is designed not for you to do, it's not designed to go from step 1 to 2 and 3. No, it's like if you're creative and you got the idea right now, just go straight to that part. When you're done, then you can go name it, fill out the description, talk about the other stuff, and just fill it out, just really simple. So you've got a whole growth hack. And then you saw in the last part where there's, run the test, and every test is built on this thing called the fail, pass, learn system. And we use that in the last book, meaning whether something fails or passes, it has value to create the next thing. But the problem is people don't know, well, I don't get it, but I've heard this all my life, that failure is good for me. So I systemized it. I systemized such a way like to pick up on like, okay, if this failed, how do I take it to the next level and adjust it or tweak it? Or do I remove a component of it? And we go through all of it so that you've thought about all the possibilities and then move the learning over. So inside we have this thing called the 1-5-20 learning system. So for every growth hack, so there's 20 space for 20 growth hacks. Every time you do your first hack, you just do the one. At the end, there's a way to fill out the learning part. The learning part is about what were some of the commonalities you noticed that worked, what were some of the things that didn't work, and then we have a whole bunch of other areas that you fill out. So after you're done your first 5 growth hacks, you have another part that says, hey, what patterns did we see in the last 5? And then it accumulates to the whole 20, and we take like a meta kind of approach to like, what's the big learning here? So we integrate the learning as you start to design, and you'll start to recognize things that you remember we were talking earlier, like, hey, you asked me a really good question. It's like, hey, is each one a separate growth hack or each one like an improvement or a further development? I said, it doesn't really matter. You can go either way. But what would be really cool if you're really focused on something, keep developing on that same growth hack and master it. Even if all 20 of them is just you mastering one thing, it's already created value for you.
Dude, it's like I said, I was blown away by I'm very rarely blown away by a book that has no writing in it.
That's one of the surprises. You're like, what the hell? I was like, guys, this is designed to activate you within the system. And so I had a few people reviewed online, and they didn't understand. They didn't have nothing to do with growth hacking, but they wanted to learn it. And so this is not like, you can start with it as long as you get trained. So I'll show you something pretty cool here. On the back of the book, there's a QR code, right? If you scan this, you get a 4-minute video to train you immediately what to do. Wow. And then I upgrade you. It's about $300 worth of training. Then I upgrade you into the next level of training, which goes a bit deeper. And then I've got the 10 secrets, which are the science behind it. So I show you, I'll give you an example. So when you do the process of a growth hack, you may have like, say, 15, 20 parts to it. And it usually happens to people where they start like with a lot of detail because they're just worried, right? What we found is anything between the sequence of 5 to 7 parts, right? So which is each step of the process, are the most optimized and the most successful type of growth hacks. So if I told people that in the beginning, they'd be like, oh, I got to keep it to 5 and 7. But I don't do that. I train you first. I say, go for it. And so you start to see it with time. And so when I tell you that it's 5 to 7, you're like, oh my God, I saw it actually shrink. And I'm coming towards 5 to 7. So is
that the same scanning in the front of the book as well? Because I saw there was one in the front.
Oh, yeah. I think inside as well. It's this one here. You mean? Yeah, that's the same one. Yeah. No, it won't take you anywhere else.
I'm ready to go everywhere, dude. Because tell your wife I'm moving into the guest room and I'm going to be there for a while.
Well, I'm gonna throw you into a challenge.
Yeah, I'm ready.
I'm starting a challenge, and you're gonna be the first one. So the first one ever is gonna be you. It's a 10-day challenge. Okay, I'm gonna work with you, and the way it's gonna be, it's just 3 hacks. That's all we're gonna do. Nice. So every hack will be 3 days. So you go ahead. We can even start out with a session if you want. At the end of the 3 days, I'll critique it to help you get it to the next level, and we'll do it for the next one and next one. And at the end of the 10 days, we'll take a look at all 3 of them, and then how do we get you to the next level? The objective is like, how do we achieve what you want and get you growing with a growth hack? And then a contender. I want you to throw someone else into
and I'm going to challenge someone else.
Challenge someone else, throw them into the pit.
I'm kind of in two minds because I kind of want to challenge my wife to keep all the money from our newfound business in the same household. But then at the same time, I kind of want to challenge someone else. So what I think I want to do is I want to buy 2 books when I order my next slot, because I'm going to get one for my wife shortly. Fantastic. And I think it's nicer, and because you did a lot, everything comes from a place of love, like you said. I think it's a lot nicer to keep your book, and then when you challenge someone else, to give them their book.
I think it's an awesome idea.
And then when they, order the next one, they will give the next book to someone else, and it's a pay it forward thing.
System,
And then when everyone makes all their money, they can pay me back.
Yeah, exactly.
No, but it's an amazing initiative, and I'm just fascinated by a lot of the things that you're saying. One thing I noticed, I believe her name was Jenny.
Jenny, yeah, yes.
Let's talk about Jenny, because
Jenny,
that fascinated me too.
Jenny, yeah, she's an amazing inspiration. So in at that time, they still happen. They're maker places, right? So maker places are guys that get together, self-initiative, homegrown, kind of grassroots community style stuff. They take a warehouse, they get like a CNC machine, and they get like 3D printing machines and a bunch of really expensive equipment that they all pull together or get sponsored. And then every week they go and they start building stuff, whatever it is you want. They'll build 3D printers, robots, whatever it was. And so they had a really active one in town, and one of my engineers like, hey, do you want to come? It's over the weekend, 2 days. And I was like, you know what? I actually want to do. I want to get creative and build a few things with you guys this weekend. So I went to the maker place. In the corner was this little girl, 9 years old. I don't know what she was doing. I thought like she was just tagging along with her dad. And then every little hour I see something building up, and I go over to her and I said, what are you building? And she's like, I'm building a robot. And I was like, wow, how did you do that? So she went like super deep in technical. I took this and I did that in the 3D printer. And then her dad came along and I said, is this your daughter? I said, yeah. And I said, wow, I mean, how did this happen? And he's like, well, ever since she was 7, I've been bringing her here, and she's getting training every weekend until now she's actually building robots, and she teaches at the university robotics. I was like, what?
Wow.
And I was like, how? And he started explaining, and then I had recognized a few very important things. Number one is how the father had invested in his daughter, how he opened her up to this form of creativity and allowed it to flourish. And I talk about this in my keynote talks. Like my son, when he was a kid, he used to draw on the walls. Not as fancy, but like you just go wild. And my wife would be like, we go crazy. I mean, obviously we're gonna have to clean and fix the wall. And I said, listen, we want to unleash his creativity, but we can keep it contained to his room only. He doesn't gotta go paint the whole house. And it allowed him to just get that creativity out. And that's really important. Yeah. And Jenny is an example of that, an amazing example of that.
I think that's really important. And to not think that he's going to get in trouble for being creative.
100%.
It's also important. Because I said the same thing to my wife when they started drawing on the walls. I mean, one of them drew the Al Jazeera logo, which was really weird for a 2-year-old.
Really?
yeah, the news logo.
Oh, wow.
I was like, what's going on here? It looks very similar. I don't think it was. Maybe it was just
maybe it's Burj Al Arab.
Yeah, maybe. But I said to her, why don't we just get a giant, one of their walls and paint it chalk. Like, you can paint 100%. It the chalk thing and just give them chalk and just let them do whatever they want.
Yes.
You never know. I mean, even if nothing comes of it, at least we want them to know that anytime they are feeling creative, they have an outlet to go and do that.
Yep.
And I struggle very hard because my wife is amazing when it comes to this. She's very into the whole communicate with them. If you wanna, if they've done something really naughty and you wanna put them into a timeout, you don't just say go to timeout. You'll take them there. You'll explain to them why. When you're taking them out of the timeout, you have to explain to them why they were there and what have they learned and this and that. And she's like, don't shout, because shouting is not gonna get anywhere. They're just gonna, jump and feel the voice and everything and stay calm and now it's becoming a lot more natural. Like I still have the occasional, hey, what's going on? But like I find myself really like explaining, and when I do, I find that they listen and they're very kind of like, okay, you're teaching me why I'm not supposed to do this, as opposed to just because I said so. Yeah. Which is so dangerous to be like 100%. To just teach them, because you're an adult, because I said so. Yeah. Well, children are the most purest form of human beings there are. Yeah. So they can literally have the answers to questions that you forgot. Do you know what I mean? When you had to turn into an adult and had to, So having them explain to you their feeling. I mean, we do a lot of work with emotions. How are you feeling right now? And Fantastic. Okay, and what about this makes you feel that way and that kind of thing. Yep. And they're only 3, but like that kind of stuff I want to keep doing to just let them know that that's the kind of household we live in. Yep. Do your affirmations in the morning and that kind of stuff, and be grateful and all that stuff. Yep. And okay, go do boxing, do football, do whatever, wrestle each other, that's fine. Yep. But to try and just really let them know that it's, everything that we do in this house is coming from a place of love.
Perfect.
And I find that doesn't happen a lot these days.
People are impatient.
Neglect as well. Just do this, watch this, or do that, or.
Well, I think it's because your wife is very patient. She seems, and I think that's a wonderful trait to have.
I'm swinging way above my weight with that one. My eyes are closed, and I'm windmilling like this. Yeah. Like I'm very, very, very lucky. Yeah. And I'm hoping she doesn't wake up anytime soon and realize. No, she's amazing. Yeah. I mean, mashallah.
Yeah, mashallah. Yeah. My wife is also a teacher, and she's very patient with kids. I don't know how she gets the patience. I was like, I get like, I like to give the space, but I get frustrated real quick because I'm always about this speed thing.
Yeah.
It's just something built in my system.
yeah.
I can't get out. And
Because your brain is working like 2 Pentium chips at the same time while we're just...
Well, I feel that I feel that there's so much value in life that time shouldn't be wasted. You know, one of the things about the pandemic that I really loved was the fact that working from home means I didn't have to drive out, find a parking, and then drive back in and deal with traffic and get frustrated. I mean, removing that stress and buying that time went a long way for me. But working from home is difficult.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the other part of it.
But isn't it on the flip side also... The most beautiful thing at life is to waste time, because by wasting time, you know, a lot of people will be like, why aren't you doing this? Why aren't you doing that? Why aren't you doing that? And then they realize that they've worked 30 years of their life and don't really realize, you know, if you ask them what their kid likes, they don't even know what kind of character they are. Yeah. So even, you know, some people would say to me, you know, going to the beach for an hour and a half during a day is wasting your time. You could be doing this. But I'm also like, yeah, you say that, but I'm hearing the waves and I'm feeling the sand and I'm looking up at the sky and watching birds. Now, to some people, that might just be, they're like, what are you talking about, you hippie? Yeah. But it's the beauty of the world that sometimes we kind of forget about.
I agree with you.
These natural things that are just there that you can actually just get so much great energy from. Like, you know, even like earthing your feet, taking your shoes and socks off and putting your feet on the grass or on mud. It has a chemical reaction, you know, that people don't realize that stuff and they forget these simple little things.
I agree. And you bring up a good point. Like my wife is usually the reminder of this kind of stuff to keep things grounded and balanced. So it's a nice balance between the both of us. But I agree with you. There are times where I just stop and I just flow. So one of the key things for me is flow. And so I learned this the hard way, right? And so when things happen, I say, just let it flow. Step back. Just let it flow. If there's something not meant to happen at that moment, just flow.
Just let it go.
Just let it go. Just flow. It'll happen at the right time. It's just, that's what it is. So I've just learned to flow. Let it go. I mean, and time, sometimes you need time off. You need to take that space because you'll come back like a cheetah. Come back because that energy or that time is needed. You don't know why, but just do it. You know, like, and you bring up something also very interesting that I always like to bring up. So whenever I'm trying to solve a problem, I tell people that, you know, that there's one solution to every problem everybody has, and I ask them, you know, do you know what it is? Can you guess what it is? And then they just go on and on and on. I say, it's balance. Like, if you look at any problem you're trying to solve, the answer is balance. Find that balance. You'll always find that a problem exists on two ends of the spectrum. Get somewhere in the middle. Find the
happy medium in the middle.
And you'll find the solution. But we're too often, like politics is a great example of this. There's this, you know,
it's either one or the other.
It's one or the other, right? There's what happened to the middle of creating this thing is I go into organizations all the time, AJ, and like I talk about harmony, and they're like, "What the hell is this guy talking about?" I said, "If you guys don't have harmony, you cannot become productive collectively as an organization." And I get it. I mean, I've worked in corporate. I know what the problems are with the silos and the office politics and the promotions and you know, one of the things I talk about in my first book is something called the growth dilemma, which is basically a culture that's been cultivated around poor performance. Yeah, you see it all the time, and it's cool and good to be a poor performer and manipulate through the system. You wouldn't believe how many books you can buy to manipulate. You know, how many methodologies have been designed to manipulate. You know, disguised as things like negotiation and so forth.
But even I mean, even a 9 to 5. I mean, people have been manipulated doing that for a long time because you get this whole thing where you could finish all your work in the office in 3 hours. But because you know they're not going to pay you to do that, if they see that you're finishing, they'll give you other random stuff to do, even if it's not your job. But they want to get their money's worth out of you.
Which is so 8 hours.
So what ends up happening is you start delaying and prolonging and wasting that and stretching that work. But to be productive, really, it should be like a 3-4 day work week of 4 hours a day. And pretty much everything could still get done.
It's true.
And people would generally be happier because they can spend time with their families and they can do other things and find other passions that they're in. But they're too scared of that paycheck. That they kind of become imprisoned.
I had a call this morning about exactly this, where she was mentioning me that they reduced their workforce dramatically. I can't remember the number, but she said it was equivalent to each one person would take another 2 jobs. So they'd have to cover another 2 functions. She's like, and it's funny because we're covering those other 2 functions and we still have extra time.
Yeah, exactly, right?
Yeah, imagine. So I think everybody watching knows what we're talking about.
Exactly.
You know, waste.
So with children, are you Are you really into the whole idea of getting children into coding young and that kind of stuff?
I've been pushing my son, encouraging him. I mean, I keep telling you.
How old is he now?
He's 11. So he's a YouTuber. Like, he does YouTube stuff and he likes to create stuff. And I can see he gets like impatient. He tried to create his own song recently, and I told him, take your time, get it right. And I keep telling him, the future involves design. It involves code. It involves the integration of the two. It involves a lot of creativity. So anything that I find inspires him to do that kind of thing, and I really believe, knowing some code, you don't have to become a coder, but knowing some code can go a long way.
Could save you a lot of money as well. Hiring other people to do a lot of stuff for you when you could just kind of do it in house.
100%.
Wow.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that you feel like we missed out that people need to hear? I mean, I'm gonna do another 8-part episodes of this because this is definitely not enough for me, and I'm sure I'm going to be getting a lot of people going, dude, you spoke way too much and there was a lot more to come. Anything else that you feel you want to touch on before we do episode 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8?
Wow. I don't know what you have in mind.
You become my mentor now, so whether you like it or not, we're going to be hanging out a lot.
I mean, I think that, like, if there was one thought I would like to leave everybody with, I know we're all worried about the future. And we sometimes we can't even sleep from it, including myself. We're always worried. And I believe in about a year to a year and a half from now, we're going to see something what I call the talent explosion. And just like we were talking about poor performance and all that, organizations are going to continue to downsize. And those who shouldn't be in the positions they are going to find themselves
doing what they love.
Out in the dark where some of them deserve. Because they're blocking a lot of talent from actually getting things done. And the reason I call this the talent explosion is this: some of the world's most difficult problems that need to be solved are not being solved
because of the politics in the workplace and all that stuff.
Until you reach that bridging point where someone has to come in, and it's going to require a very unique type of talent. So you're going to see a talent explosion about a year and a half from now.
Nice.
So get ready. Take your courses, start learning. Fix yourself, get healthy, like you said about balance, re-energize yourself, recalibrate with your environment, fix your lifestyle, get ready. A year and a half from now, there's going to be a talent explosion. I'm
going to be ready in 10 days. Are we starting tomorrow? Dude, it's been an absolute pleasure. I only wish we had more time.
Thank you.
But again, please, it would be lovely for you, because I know you have a million more stories to tell to get you back on again.
Sure.
Guys, don't forget to like and subscribe, and you're very welcome. And we'll do this again sometime.
Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for having me on, and thank you for your patience.
Anytime. Anytime. It's been an absolute pleasure. Pleasure is all mine.
Thank you.
Thank you.